It's really easier coming this way than going the other way. Okay. There we go. It just sounded like a bunch of old men meeting in the park. How'd you sleep? How's your vertigo? How's your arthritis?
Is your knee still doing okay?
Right, your trick knee.
It's always inspired to be, man. Old Jewish scratching men.
Okay, so we got up to the second shot in the word mikem. What we learned up until now. In the second chapter, we learned as follows: Adam ki yakri, and the pasuk's on the board over there. Adam ki yakri mikem, a person who wants to come. Adam ki yakri, a person who wants to come close to Kadosh Baruch Hu mikem. It's dependent on you, and dependent on you means you can, and that's what the Rebbe said in the first half of the page. It's dependent on you because Ein Kadosh Baruch Hu Baba truly that the Yibshah does not come in a tyrannical way with his creations. And that means if he asks us to do something, what does it say? I'm not asking in accordance with my power, but rather in accordance with their potential. And that's us. Okay. And it's challenging because if I can do it, so then I guess I should, right? But if I can't, so then I'm putter. Right. I had one of those moments in class yesterday where I blew it completely, unfortunately, because she was very upset. But whatever, I was misunderstood. But what can you do? You're misunderstood by an 18-year-old, so they get upset. Mm-hmm. But a girl, I just asked a girl to look in her book. She didn't have a book. She had a pomelo and a plate in front of her, but she didn't have a book. I just asked her to get a book. So she said, well, she started with it, I am. Right? I am. And then, you can fill in the blank. I am ... I am someone who doesn't do well in books, but I listen better, or, whatever. And there are people like that. But that I am, I am now about to explain why I'm not doing what I should do. And I'm going to explain that that's an expression of my essential being. I am a ... It's such a dangerous statement, right? So I talked about that, but I was not, she did not take it right. How could I know? I felt bad. I felt badly. I apologize, but the apology will end. I don't know whether I'll ever see her again in class, but whatever. But it did that I am, So this is the opposite of I am. Well, or as this is the definition of who the real I am is. And so the real I am whatever I have to be in order to do whatever it is that has to get done. That's what we are. Okay, say it now. So then we have to get it together. And that's why the Rebbeim are hard on us. They're challenging.
If we could do Chazar for a second, what was the first shot?
That's what we're doing right now. Adam ki Yaakov,
okay.
a person who wants to come close to a Kadosh Baruch Hu, mikem, it's dependent on you. That's the first shot.
Got it. Okay.
Right? Now we're going to say Adam ki Yaakov, mikem korban lavaya. From you is a korban. Maisha, we should really have a board on this side now that you've switched to that side, right? We actually should have a mirror on this side. So you can just look in the mirror and see if you can read backwards. You have to be able to read backwards.
That's harder. Backwards.
You get really good.
Rabbi Groner from Australia, Rabbi Yitzhak David Groner, who was they wrote a book about him, and it's one of those books that has probably one of the greatest titles of any book I've ever seen. The name of the book is Larger Than Life. He was just larger. He was larger in Gashmis. He was an enormous person. He was 6'3", 6'4", and
Oh wow!
I mean, you met him, I'm sure, because you're not. No. He must have been 300 pounds, though. I mean, he was a really big guy. He used to get 2 seats on a plane. He used to buy 2 seats on a plane. Once he checked in and the seats were 3 or 4 rows apart. So he said, I'm big, but I'm not that big. He really was large. It's such a perfect name for a book about him. He's larger than life. So his daughter got married to a very special husband named Tzvi Telsner. And the chasna was here because Tzvi's parents lived here already. So the chasna was here. And so Sheva Brachas was here. One of the Sheva Brachas was in the Alter Rebbe Shul, the Balatanya Shul in Meir Shar. That was downtown Lubavitch in Yerushalayim in those days. There's a shul in the shuk in Meir Shar. There's a I don't know whether you know Meir Shar so well, but if you walk down the thin street that you're going towards the old city, so to the right there's an entrance into a market. It's like a shuk. And in that shuk, on Balatanya Street is the Balatanya Shul, and that's a beautiful shul. And that's where Lubavitch used to be. Everything Lubavitch happening in Yerushalayim happened there in those days. So they were farbrengen there. They made a Shem Brachas and farbrengen. It's 3-4 blocks, maybe a little further from Mir Yeshiva. So even Mir was not 5,000 guys in those days. It was a couple of hundred guys, but there were still Americans, and the Americans used to come up to see what was going on in Lubavitch, where everybody's favorite spectator sport. Right? So they would come to the Farbrengens, so Bacher asked Rabbi Groner, what's the Lubavitcher Rebbe really all about? Now this is when the Rebbe was not, that well. No, you're talking in the 70s. Rebbe was just starting to become a very well-known public figure, but still, nothing compared to what the reality is now. So. What's the Lubavitcher Rebbe all about? So Rabbi Groner said a very, very famous line, which is quoted over and over again by many people in his inimitable way, because he roared, he didn't talk, he used to roar, right? I remember once he came to our shul to daven on Yud Shvat. So Yud Shvat is a question whether or not you say Tachnan or not. It's a yortzeit of a tzaddik, and we say Tachnan on the yortzeit of a tzaddik. On the other hand, it's when the Rebbe became Rebbe. So the old timers all say Tachnan, because it's the Frierdiker Rebbe's yortzeit. The younger Chassidim tend not to say Tachnan on Yud Shvat. The Rebbe's say Tachnan on Yud Shvat, and until the Chassidim made sure there was always a chassan or someone who was having a bris that day in shul, so he could never say Tachnan. But the Rebbe would say Tachnan on Yud Shvat. If not, so the older Chassidim said, The younger Chassidim said, okay, we get it. The Rebbe is saying Tachnan on Yud Shvat because in all fairness, for the Rebbe, Yud Shvat is the yortzeit of the Frierdiker Rebbe. For us, Yud Shvat is the Rebbe becoming Rebbe. It's a completely different day. So anyway, there was always that. So we were in our shul, and someone was davening from the Amid on Yud Shvat. Rabbi Groner was in the back of the shul. And all of a sudden we hear from the back of the shul, a roar. I mean, those shul's walls it's an old Arab schoolhouse. The walls are literally this thick. They shook. Don't tell me I was there. And he, roared to us. We all said Tachnan because it was Pikuach Nefesh if we didn't say Tachnan. So we said Tachnan. But he was larger than life. And he built Melbourne. The Lubavitch as it is in Melbourne, that's Rabbi Groner. So when he was asked that question, so he looked at the Bacher. He says, it was in English. He was asked in English, and he answered in English. He said, my Rebbe is a slave driver. That's what he said. My Rebbe is a slave driver. Well, do more. Keep working. Don't stop. That's what the Frierdiker Rebbe told us yesterday. In a very nice, gentle way, but that's what he said. Okay. He meant it in a good way. Right? When he was in Yechidus with his wife was as petite as he was big. I'd never met her, and I finally did meet her one day in Melbourne. Had the incredible, I must say it was an incredible honor. It was something extremely special. Rabbi Groner always gave a Sunday shir in Chumash and Rashi to the women of Melbourne. And after he passed away, so I was in Melbourne one summer teaching different places, and they asked me to give that shir. It was in his house. So I got to give Rabbi Groner's shir in his house, which was an amazing. It was a very, for me personally, it was a very special thing to do because he was a special guy, and so I met his wife. This big and I mean, she was the size of his arm. She was this tiny little. Baruch Hashem. So, I don't know where that came from, but Adam Ki Yaakov. I was going to say something, I don't remember what it is. We're going back to Adam Ki Yaakov. So now, what is it that we're supposed to be mindful? We're in the middle of 113. The first pshat we saw yesterday. It's dependent on us. Second pshat is now. Ki yadu enyanim b'zeh. Sorry. Shu nefesh b'amis. Right? Then what are we supposed to sacrifice? The eina kavana rak. You see where I am there? The line starts with et hakorban lahavaya. Mamish in the middle of the paragraph. Smack dab in the middle. The line begins es hakorban lahavaya. The eina kavana rak hakorban shel behema bilvad. The intention in the pasuk is not simply the korban of the behema that you put on the altar. Ki im mikem mamish, but rather from you mamish, which is the simple pshat in the pasuk, and that's actually in pshat. That's what makes the pasuk difficult, because in pshat the syntax of the pasuk is it sounds like you're sacrificing from amongst you. Well, we're not. We don't do human sacrifices, right? But it sounds that way. Adam ki yakriv mikem, a person who sacrifices from amongst you, a korban to Hashem. It sounds like the korban comes from amongst us. Right, so we understand that what it really means is Adam Mikem, a person from amongst you who sacrifices. Okay, in Panemius, the word Mikem is in the right place. Adam Ki Akriv, a person who wants to come close to a Kadosh Baruch Hu. Mikem, from you, it's dependent on you. That's what we saw up until now. Now the Rebbe is going to explain the Mikem as relevant to the end of the pasuk. Mikem, Korban Levaya. From you, there must be a Korban Levaya. What's that? So we talked about it at the very end of Shir yesterday. V'hu mina behema. From the behema, that's what the pasuk says. Mina behema. Adam ki yakriv mikem korban levaya. Mina behema, klal, general idea, domesticated animals. Right? Mina bakar, mina tzoyin, which are the prat, the details. What kind of domesticated animals? Cows and sheep. V'hu mina behema. What's that? Ha behema shebaliba shalom. The behema that's in the heart of a person. What's that? Shu nefesh habahamis. The sacrifice of nefesh habahamis. What does that mean to sacrifice it? It doesn't mean to kill it. It means to elevate it and illuminate it, like a sacrifice. Mina bakar, mina tzoyin. We talked about this yesterday at the end of Shir. Who's the bakar and the tzoyin? Hein hema, they are haprate madureges de yeshnam b'nefesh habahamis. The different levels that there are in the nefesh habahamis. Ki yadua, enyanim b'zeh. The eina deimer ha'oifane habirurim b'kol echad ve'echad. They're not similar, the different ways in which a person has to bring about rectifications in their own life, right? What are they, in America, everybody has their own baggage, right? Okay, your nefesh habahamis is your baggage. Everybody has their own baggage, right? And my baggage is different than your baggage. What do I have to work on in my life? Well, I have to work on things that you might not have to work on. You might be very good at that. You have to work on something else, right? Okay, and everybody has their own avodah. And what's that avodah based on? The nature of the nefesh habahamis. Some people are extremely passionate, so the nefesh habahamis, if it's passionate, we can get them into lots of trouble. Okay, fine. Some people are very, very cool and very distant. Okay, so their nefesh habahamis is going to cause them to be an unfeeling person and a person who can't relate to people. It's okay, so they have to work on that. And everybody's going to have something else to work on. The yeshna nefesh habahamis shaloi. There is those, again, this we mentioned yesterday at the end of the Shir. There are those who their nefesh habahamis who shor nagach is like a goring ox, ubal mides gases beyeser, very crass. Gasot means thick, but in terms of emotional attributes, you'd probably call it crassness. Someone very crass, someone who has no class, someone who's just very into gashmias, right? The the football fan with his shirt off in the middle of the winter in the Midwest, screaming as something's happening on the field, okay? The English football fan beating the living daylights out of the guy next to him as they're watching the game. For some reason, he decided it would be nice to beat the guy up. Well, okay, fine. The Brazilian football fan where it's actually physically dangerous. Okay, fine. Strange ways people act. Okay, the guy watching the movie, right? Okay, we talked about it yesterday. That's the goring ox. Now you might be scared to have this guy in your house because he might eat the living room furniture. Okay, pretty rough guy. Okay, there's other people who are tzoin. Sheep. Shu behemedaka. What's a sheep? Dak literally means thin, but in this context, it's a smaller animal. Af shegam ze b'chal behema, even though it's a behema, right? And what's that? So we talked about that. That's more sophisticated, probably more educated. He's more educated than the shore. Okay, so he watches a film instead of going to the movies. Okay, is it Nefesh Bahamis? Yeah, it's Nefesh Bahamis. Just like the guy screaming at the football match, the little lady with her opera glasses talking about, hey, isn't the soprano just wonderful? She's just like that. Okay, so where's that coming from? It's also Nefesh Bahamis, right? I might seem more sophisticated, so it is more sophisticated than the guy screaming in a football game. There's no doubt about that. But it's still coming from the same place. Okay. Interestingly enough, who's usually harder to move and change? The sheep.
The sheep.
Sheep is harder to change because the sheep tends to be very impressed with him or herself. The ox, he's not impressed with himself. He's just into gashmis. He's into having a good time and screaming and yelling and drinking beer and burping. Okay, so if that guy, you can actually convince that guy that there might be something in life that's a little more important than drinking beer, right? Okay, whereas the sheep tends to be more impressed with themselves, so it might be harder to convince them that where they are isn't necessarily the place to be. They're convinced that you're making the mistake, and that you should be where they are, right? The football fan doesn't necessarily think that there's something wrong with you if you don't like football. Okay, you don't like football. He thinks, he feels sad for you. He feels bad for you. He's not going to try to be makar of you to get drunk and watch football games, right? It's not necessary. The one who's into the arts will think that there's something wrong with you if you're not. You're an inferior person. Oh, okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I don't like opera. Oh, my goodness, you're not a sophisticated person at all. Somebody have to say this with an English accent. I don't know what it is. They go together. Americans put on fake English accents when they go to the opera. Theoretically, they should put on Italian accents, but they don't. Okay, so there's the Bakr and the Tzayin, but it's all Nefesh Bahamis. It's definitely more sophisticated. There's no question that it's more impressive, right? Someone who isn't screaming and yelling at the football game is not exactly impressive. Someone who's acquired a certain taste for something and can talk about it in a reasonable, that's fine, but it's no less Nefesh Bahamis than anything else. Interestingly enough, what is it that was always talked about as the most dangerous thing out there, and it's from the times of Chazal all the way through times in Europe, the teatron, theater, teatron. It's called by Chazal teatron. The teatron, people going to the theater, always seen as something very, very dangerous to the Jewish soul, and it was a place where people were dragged away from Yiddishkeit. It's interesting. One of the four contrasting that the Rebbe Shab wrote, the students of Temchei Temimim, Kuntres Tefillah, obviously mostly talking about Tefillah, but talks a lot about dealing with Nefesh Bahamis.
What's the Rebbe? What's an ein kaf thing?
Al kol panim, nevertheless. V'zebedakus al kol panim. Nevertheless, it is more subtle, even though it's still Nefesh Bahamis. So I don't think, if you had an ox in your living room, I think you'd be worried that he might destroy the place. If you had a sheep in your living room, so I don't think you'd be worried about her breaking too much, right? Mayanot literally a sheep. She's much calmer.
Yeah, but
No.
what's the contrast on?
Tefillah. Kuntres and tefillah. Prayer. V'zeu she'emer she'takrivos korbanochem. That's why at the end of the pasuk, which is not written up there, and this is the first time we've seen it in the Maimer, at the end of the pasuk it says, Mina behema, mina bakar, mina tzoin, asher takri, it doesn't say share, takrivu es korbanochem. Sacrifice your sacrifice. Everybody has their own sacrifice. Everybody has their nefesh habahamis is different. Everybody has different challenges, right? Some people, getting up in the morning is relatively easy, and so they pop out of bed like a piece of toast, and they get on with their life, and fine. Other people getting out of bed is an absolute World War VI. It's just a terrible battle every morning. Okay. So the person who pops out of bed, so he just has to be happy that's, he just doesn't find it so difficult to get up. And the other person, okay, he's going to have to work. He has to get up, but it's going to be much harder for him. So that guy, it might be that it might be as much work for him to get up at 8 as it is for the other guy to get up at 5:30. So the guy who gets up at 5:30 is supposed to feel superior to the guy who gets up at 8? No. He just, you don't have his Yetzer Hara to stay in bed. So you just, say thank you very much. And you have another Yetzer Hara, and you don't want to talk to us about that. You want to talk to us about how you get up so early in the morning. That's what you want to talk to us about. Okay, fine. So that just, it's the way it is. Everybody's different. I've always found it interesting. I get up relatively early in the morning. The first alarm rings at 5:30. I don't answer that one. There's another one 7 minutes later that usually gets me out of bed. First, I think, the first one, I somehow have a hard time with the first one. Some people don't. They just, they pop up. I thought, over time, I just assumed when I was younger that over time I would get used to this. I still hate it. I've been doing it for 40 years and I still hate it every single day. I can't stand when the alarm rings at 5:30. Not that I don't like getting up and being alive. I want to stay in bed because I'm tired. I really did think at a certain age, just get used to it. You don't get used to it. Every morning it's the same pain in the neck. Okay, once you're up, you're fine. It's 2 minutes later, you're fine. But getting out of bed, especially on winter morning, it's cold. Oh my goodness. Okay, this is the way it is. This is the way it is. Now the Rebbe is going to explain how it works. How is it that we sacrifice our nefesh habahamis? So we get the cue how to sacrifice our nefesh habahamis. We get from the sacrifices in the temple, in the altar. How to work. And from what happened there, we understand how we're supposed to do it in Ruchnius. There, they did it in Gashmius. They did it in physicality. How do we do it in Ruchnius? So the Rebbe says, "V'hine, but korban agashmi, in the physical korban, hu shemavin, and that's when you bring a behema gashmi, it's a physical animal, a cow, an ox, a sheep, a goat, some birds, al gave a mizbeach." What was there? And this is only in the first temple, but there was an amazing event that happened. V'haya eish shelamayla. There was a fire from above. What does that mean? So let's keep reading. K'de'isa b'yuma, like it says in Gemara Yuma, Chaf Aleph on the base. It's also the Rebbe's going to bring a zoyer. Revutza ka'ari. It was crouched like a lion. What was crouched like a lion? That when this is only in the first base of Mikdash, that when we would put a korban on the altar, how did the altar work? The altar was enormous. Right? It was huge. Right? It was very, very big. It was high and it was huge, 32 amos. It was a big, huge place. And in the corner was what was called, you say this every morning in Korbanos, Eish Tamid Tukar al Mizbeach Lo Yisikbeh. There was a constant fire burning on the Mizbeach Lo Yisikbeh. It's not allowed to go out. 24/7 there was a fire burning in the corner of the base of the Mizbeach. And what was that fire? That was the pilot light. Right? There's no such thing anymore, but in the old days you would have a pilot light. What was the pilot light? A small little flame this big in your gas dryer or on your stove, and that flame was this big, and when you wanted to light the bigger flame, so the gas would touch that and ignite the bigger element or the dryer or whatever it was that now they have those little clickers. Okay, in those days, before there was what was called a pilot light. Okay, so the pilot light in the corner of the base of Mikdash was a fire burning all the time, and when we wanted to bring a korban, so there would be a huge pile of wood in the middle of the Mizbeach, and then bring fire from there, move it over here, ignite this fire, and then start bringing korbanos. So that was the pilot light in the corner of the Beis HaMikdash. So that's how we burnt it from below. But what also used to happen? So Rashi explains. The Gemara says, Revutza ka'ari, crouched like a lion, and the parentheses explain Rashi's pshat. Gecheles shenafla min hashamayim, a coal, C-O-A-L, like, barbecue coal. A gecheles shenafla min hashamayim, bimei shleim, in the days of Shlomo Melech, meaning in the times of the first temple. V'haisal mizbeach, and it was on the mizbeach, and evidently it was in the form of a lion. A lion, a fire in the form of a lion used to pounce on the korban from above. We'd light the fire below, but there was also a miracle that a lion would pounce on the korban from above. Now, God doesn't do miracles just for fun, so what was this all about?
And Rabbi, what's the coal doing?
That was the lion. Coal is a fire.
Oh, the coal was being ignited and it was...
It wasn't it? It was fire. A coal is fire, right? What's a coal? It's burning hot fire. It's the coal. The coal.
It was in the shape of a lion?
What?
It was in the shape of a lion?
It was in the shape of a lion. Right? It didn't look like a Kingsford briquette. It was in the shape of a lion. Right? Ubezayar, he said, the Zayar explains the same thing. Arya da'achal karbonin. The lion that eats korbanos. Oh, okay. So now what was that about? So the Rebbe explains. Hine. Kameichenu ba'avoda b'nefesh adam. So to our avoda with our nefesh ba'amis. Hara yesh eish shelamayla. There's a fire from above. When we try to sacrifice our nefesh ba'amis, so obviously there's a lot of work that we have to do from, so to speak, below. But the Eibishter also helps us out with this miraculous fire from above. Now, what is the fire from above? V'hu harishvei eish. This is the burning fire of love, shebenefesh elokis, that exists in the godly soul. Ukemaimer, like the pasuk says, rishafer rishvei eish shall heves ka. It's a fire. Its flames are fiery. Shall heves. Rishafer is just burning. It's a burning fire. Shall heves ka, a flame of Yud K, God's name. The soul is considered like a fire. What does that mean? It elevates what? Elevates the nefesh ba'amis. It illuminates it and warms it up and ultimately elevates it like a korban.
Well, this love is from the nefesh ba'amis or from the soul in general?
That is what?
The love is from the nefesh ba'amis or from the soul in general?
Nefesh elokis, the godly soul, not the animal soul. We're trying to bring the animal soul to a state of love. The animal soul doesn't have an innate state of love for Kadosh Baruch Hu. The godly soul does, but the animal soul does not. Trying to get the animal soul to love God, which we'll talk about on the next page.
But doesn't the animalistic soul have a hidden love?
Animal soul? No. Godly soul does. Animal soul doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
Naturally, no. Can it be educated to love God? Yes. Mm-hmm. Naturally, does it love God? No. The godly soul has what's called Ava Mesuteret, the hidden love, not the animal soul. But if you get the animal soul involved, it can be quite powerful. It can be quite powerful. As we'll see, the Rebbe is going to explain that. Mm-hmm. Right? The Isa b'Medrash Rabbah. So now first the Rebbe is going to explain this idea of Eish Shelamayla. So those of us who learn Maim Rabbim, we know what Eish Shelamayla is. We learned it in the Maimer. We've learned it fairly recently, I think. We learned Maim Rabbim. But before the Rebbe explains how this works in you and I, what do you and I do to somehow connect to all this in real life? First the Rebbe is going to explain what's unique about the fire from above. What does a fire from above mean? Because now when we're sacrificing the Nefesh Ba'amis, there's two. When you sacrifice a korban on the Beis HaMikdash, there's two fires. There's a fire from below that you and I ignite, and there's a fire from above that the Kadosh Baruch Hu sends down from above to devour the korban. Okay. So too in our avodah, there's a fire from below that you and I have to ignite. We don't know what that is yet. And there's a fire from above. What's the fire from above? We don't know how it works, and we don't know how to access it. The Rebbe hasn't told us that. But there's a fire from above, and what's that? The fiery love of the godly soul for a Kadosh Baruch Hu. Okay. Now, what's important about that? It might be obvious already, but it's going to become obvious, but it has to be said first. This is saying something extremely important about Avodas Hashem. Avodas Hashem is not simply discipline. Discipline is the fire from below. Discipline is my nefesh bahamis doing that which is necessary to be a healthier nefesh bahamis. Okay, that's discipline. That's important. That's iskafia. But when you and I are trying to come close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and exactly the same when you and I are trying to affect another Jew and help that Jew come closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, what must we be aware of? Extremely important with ourselves, also extremely important with the other Jew. They have a nefesh bahamis. They have a nefesh elokis. You're not just talking to their nefesh bahamis. You're talking to their nefesh elokis. You're talking to their godly soul. There's a part of them that is dying to connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It loves the Eibishter with a love we can't even imagine. And that's as much part of them as their nefesh bahamis. There's this conscious person there. That's true. The only way you can get to the nefesh elokis is through the conscious person that's standing in front of you and talking to you. Okay. But don't think you have to tailor the idea completely and totally the nefesh bahamis to the exclusion of the nefesh elokis. Yes, the idea has to be something the nefesh bahamis, meaning human intellect, human consciousness, can relate to. That's true. But ultimately, you're trying to use that to get to the point in that Jew that is completely and totally connected to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And ignite that. I mean, it's already ignited, but get the person to somehow feel that in their conscious reality. So too with ourselves. Right? So that's what the Rebbe is going to explain. But before he explains how to do that, the Rebbe is going to explain what's unique about a fire from above. Right? The fact that it's nefesh elokis in us, okay, but also this fire from above. What's the idea of a fire from above? So fire from above, meaning metaphysical fire, is different than physical fire. Right? So the Rebbe is going to explain. And we learned this in Mayim Rabin. The Isa b'medrash, 5 lines up. Isa b'medrash Rabbi Huva b'Yalkut is brought in the Yalkut Shimoni. Ke'esh shelamayla, like a fire from above. What's a fire from above? It's unique. The fiery love of the nefesh bahamis. What's unique about that fiery love? She'eina eish mechaber l'mayim, ve'eina mayim mechabim la'esh. That the fire doesn't extinguish water, and the water doesn't extinguish fire. Physical water and physical fire are in direct competition one with the other. And when they come into contact, one or the other wins. If they come into direct contact, the water wins. If they come into contact with a pot in between, the fire wins. There's no more water. The water will disappear within, I don't know how much water, how much fire. It won't take that long, and there won't be water in the pot. The fire will do away with the water. Right? It'll also do away with the pot once the water is no longer in the pot, but that's a separate issue. Right? So those two things are completely contrary one to the other and can't exist in a state of harmony in this world, except in a miraculous way. When did they exist in a state of harmony in a miraculous way in this world? Current events. Mamash current events.
Oh, you mean like in the parsha with the hail?
Yeah, beautiful. Like in the parsha with the hail. Bediuk, well said. Right? The hail in Mitzrayim. What was unique about the hail in Mitzrayim? It was what?
It's the flashing is where the Rashi takes it from.
The what?
There's a fire.
There was a fire in the hailstones. Yeah, there was fire in the hailstone. Was obviously a hailstone, which is ice, and in the ice was a fire. And when the hailstone would hit, the fire would then come out and start burning things. Double dose of negativity. It wasn't, for us it was good, but for the Egyptians it couldn't have been a very fun 9 months for the Egyptians. Just one after the other. Right? Having frogs in your belly croaking away.
Whoa.
You open your oven, there's a frog in your oven. Fair. But the frogs went inside their bellies, right? Rashi and Chumash, if you didn't know. You'll know. Look at Rashi. We already did. Svardim was yesterday. Okay. So the fire from above. What's unique about a fire from above? A physical fire, primordial fire. What's the story? It exists in harmony with Eish. What's an example? What's it called? Rashi and Chumash again. I hate to be so annoying and think that Rashi and Chumash might be part of our lives, but Rashi and Chumash, beginning of the Chumash, Bereshis, first pasuk in the Chumash. So you don't have to go so far. If you make achlata, I'm going to start learning Rashi and Chumash. You don't have to get very far to run into this Rashi. Though you might start with the Parsha and not Bereshis. Right? Right? What did God create in the beginning, so to speak? What does it say he created? First pasuk in the Torah.
Like,
The heaven and the earth. That's the first pasuk in the Torah. You have to know this, right? You can't not know the first pasuk in the Torah. You just can't not know that. There's no such thing, right? Okay. I mean, that's something you have to have a kviyas shebenefesh that's something I have to know, right? And then you'll know it. If it's optional, I might not, right? I could be Reuven Dunan about it, but I won't be Reuven Dunan, But there's certain things in life that you just have to know, right? You have to know how to use those little things that exist in those little rooms, whether you go and you close the door and you're in there alone, those little seats there. You have to know how to use that. There's no such thing as being an adult and not knowing how to use that. No such thing. So you make sure you do, right? Okay. So you have to know the first pasuk in Torah. It's exactly the same. That's less important than knowing the first pasuk in Torah. And what does it say? If you don't know, so sit down right now. Not right now, but at some point, make it a point that every single day you're going to learn 2 or 3 new psukim in the Torah, and you're going to remember them every single day. And then you'll know the Torah at some point. When? Oh, it's going to take me 20 years. Well, what else have we got to do for the next 20 years? God created Shemayim and Haaretz. What's Shemayim? Rashi on Torah. Eish and Mayim. A place where Eish and Mayim exist in harmony. Shamayim, Eish and Mayim. That's what the word, one of the pshatim in the word. Okay, so what does that mean? That means that they're not contrary to each other. That means there's a fire that water doesn't douse. Okay, and that's the fire from above. So why is that important? Well, if we learned Mayim Rabim, we remember, right? I remember when we did it. Maybe we didn't do it recently. I'm not sure. Right? She'ena eish mechabel l'mayim, ve'ena mayim mechabim leish. V'hainu, she'beteva nefesh elokis. What does this mean? It's in the nature of the nefesh elokis, of the godly soul. Harayesh by rishvei eish ha'ava lelokus. It has a burning love for God. That's the nature of the nefesh elokis, the godly soul. V'hu bedugmas, and it's like eish shelamayla. It's like a fire from above. What's that? She'ena mayim mechabin, I say. The water doesn't douse that fire, meaning that fire stays lit. It's not that there's something that's going to extinguish that love. Mm-hmm. What is it that might extinguish that love? What water is it that you think might extinguish that love? V'hamayim, what is that mayim? Hey mayim rabim. They are the turbulent, usually, it literally means many waters, obviously. It's often translated as turbulent waters. What does mayim rabim represent in Chassidus? It's a pasuk in Shir Shirim. Shlomo Melech says, "Mayim rabim lo yuchlu lechabes ha'ava v'naros lo yishtafuah." The many waters can't douse the love, and the rivers don't wash it away. Mm-hmm. What's the love? The love is the innate love of the nefesh elokis for God. What's the mayim rabim that doesn't wash away the love, that doesn't douse the love? What are the rivers that don't wash away that love? Tirdas haparnasa, right? All of the problems of dealing with Eilam Hazeh, and the single biggest problem in Eilam Hazeh is figuring out how to make a living. But ribuya tirdas, all of the bothers, there's a bother, troubles and bothers. But tirdas haparnasa, in making a living, ubilbulim shainim, and other bilbul, bavel. Bilbul is confusions, libalbel. I think it's onomatopoeia, right? Isn't it sort of like bilbul? Right? It's just like all mixed up together. Bilbulim shining, but tirdas shyness with all of the different troubles, problems, and tribulations that what are mabalbulim that confuse a person, but Torah and Aveda relative to Torah and mitzvahs. What gets in the way of learning Torah more than any other single thing in Eilam Hazeh? To figure out how to make a living, right? If it weren't for that, we'd probably have a lot more time on our hands, right? And we'd probably be a little calmer, right? So not worry about these sort of things. Now, that whole mimer is about coming to the point where a person doesn't worry about these whole things, because worrying about it shows that I don't have enough bitachon in the Eibishter and emunah in the Eibishter that he's the source of the parnasa. Okay, the Rebbe talks about that at the beginning of that mimer. Right. Okay. But what are the Mayim Rabim? The Mayim Rabim is all of the craziness of Eilam Hazeh that you might think. It's called Mayim because what does Mayim do? Mayim hides. Mayim conceals. Even though we think of Mayim, usually you can see through water, sort of. Okay, which is true. You can. Okay. But if you think about it, Mayim actually hides as opposed to reveals, and that's understood very, very simply, relative to an experience that everybody in the room has had in the fairly recent past, as you've been in an airplane And when you look out of an airplane, if you sit at the window as opposed to the aisle, if you like those seats, right? So you look out the airplane and you see the world below. And if you are flying over the ecosystem that lives in air, you see everything going on in that ecosystem. You see the trees, and you can even see houses and cars, and you see whatever's down there, right? Okay, and if you're flying over the ecosystem that exists in water, what do you see? Nothing. The water conceals that whole ecosystem. You don't see it. That's Mayim Rabim. It's interesting because we don't think of water as something that conceals, but it does. It conceals to such an extent that you might say, oh my gosh, I was at a beach in the Caribbean. Unbelievable. You could see 15, 20, 30 feet down in the water. It was clear as a bell. Okay, well, that's LA on a pretty bad smog day, right? 30, 40 feet. If you can't see 30 or 40 feet in the air, then you're either it's
living in
extremely
California,
foggy or you're in the middle of a forest fire, right? 30, 40 feet in the air is not very far. Okay, in water, it is. I mean, if you're looking at water, you can see 30, 40 feet. It is. It's crystal clear. It's amazing. Okay. Could be because water hides. So what's the Mayim Rabim? All of those troubles and tribulations in Elam Hazeh that hide our connection, that hide godliness, and so make our connection to the Eibishter difficult. And therefore, what might we think that water would douse the fiery love of the Nefesh Elokis? Water douses fire. We might think that fire will be doused, and so the love as the Nefesh Elokis comes into this world, it loses that passionate love for the Eibishter because it has to deal with all the craziness of Elam Hazeh. Right? Famous story that Rav Zusha of Anapoli used to tell, right? Rav Zusha was a contemporary of the Alter Rebbe, one of the Talmidim of the Maggid. He was the Rav Elimelech of Lizansk. They were brothers, the two famous brothers. So Rav Zusha used to tell a mashal of a story of two neshamas. One neshama is leaving Elam Hazeh. He's done his 120 years, and the other neshama is coming down into Elam Hazeh to make sure that some poor woman's birth ends now. So they meet, and the neshama coming down into Elam Hazeh wants to know, what's it like? What's Welt? What's it like down there? What goes on? So the neshama going up says, you can get tzitzis for 5 kopecks. Tzitzis, wow, he's heard of tzitzis. Wow, what tzitzis is unbelievable. Tzitzis, you're surrounding yourself with godliness. You're completely enveloped in godliness all day long. He's like so excited. This is unbelievable. Tzitzis is a greater level of connection to godliness than anything that the neshama can experience above. So the neshama is so excited, and he starts going faster and faster to get down there so he can get closer and closer to a place where he's going to be able to wear tzitzis. And tzitzis only cost 5 kopecks. 5 kopecks, that's nothing. It's peanuts. So the neshama going back up, as he says, the neshama going down starts to speed up. The neshama looks at him and says, but wait until you see what you have to do to earn those 5 kopecks. Welcome to Elam Hazeh, neshama. All the crazy things you're going to have to do to figure out how to make 5 kopecks. Ball bearings. You might have to open a ball bearing factory. Oh, wow. When neshama came into Elam Hazeh to run a ball bearing factory. Okay. So we do funny things to make a living. There's no doubt about it. Okay.
So Rabbi,
It's Elam Hazeh,
the mind is hiding the love that we have for Hashem, but
Well, it isn't.
But
That's exactly the point. Theoretically, it should be able to douse the love.
Yeah.
But since the love is a fire from above, what do we know about a fire from above?
can't be extinguished.
Can't be extinguished. Mayim doesn't extinguish it. Oh, so even though the neshama comes down into this place full of water, so to speak, right? And it doesn't mean that the world is 3/4 water. That's not what it's talking about, obviously. It's coming down to a place where you might drown in all the concealment of Elam Hazeh. The neshama doesn't drown. The neshama is not affected. Now, that doesn't mean the neshama finds it easy to express itself down here, because it might be the nefesh habahamis is not interested in expressing the desires of the soul. Okay, that's what we're going to see in the next page. I was going to teach us how do we get there. But the first thing we have to understand is there's a fire from above, and that fire from above maintains its intense love for Kadosh Baruch Hu, even though it is clothed in a body and a nefesh habahamis down here in this wild and woolly place called Elam Hazeh. This place God created that's just the craziest idea imaginable. This place. Okay. Certainly for a neshama, it's a crazy place. V'ubedugmas eish shelamayla she'ena mayim mechabin esay. V'mayim, what is this mayim that might do that? So what's mayim? Mayim rabim, hema mayim rabim, baribui hatirdos, patirdos parnasa, that's the most threatening thing. Ubilbulim shainim batirdos shainis ababalbulim b'tarva aveda. All these things that get in the way of someone's Torah study, someone's aveda, someone's davening, etc. Okay. Right? They always, they always used to say, what's the difference between a minyan in yeshiva and a minyan of balabatim? Balabatim means people who go to work in the morning. What's the difference? Yeshiva minyan has a starting time. Minyan of the balabatim
Has an ending time.
has a finishing time. It has to finish at a certain time. There's a train to the city at a certain time. The other shul has to finish at a certain time. Who's ever davening for Yom, it has to make sure people can leave the shul at a time to get to work. Right? I mean, right? Now, you can, that doesn't mean that you have to daven in a 7:15 shul if you have a 7:30 train. You do 7:15 minyan. Maybe you should daven in a 6:30 minyan if you have a 7:30 train. Okay, that's true. But people at a certain point in the minyan, you see people leaving quickly. Why? Well, because they have to get to work and they might have a train that they have to get and they don't want to miss the train. Okay, you're allowed to do that. Right? Would it be nice? Can you live a life in such a way that isn't how your morning works? Yes, you can. But it's harder. If you work for someone else, it's harder. If you work for yourself, then it's easy. Right? You might notice people, it's funny because usually when Americans come here at the beginning, it's less now because we don't live there, but in the old days when the yeshiva was so close to Geula, the guys who would come at first would sort of like, why don't the stores open until 10 o'clock? Like, well, what's going on here? I need something and it's 8 o'clock and the stores are all closed. Yeah, the stores are closed. Why are the stores closed? Go at 10 and see who's running the store. Who's running the store? What's he been doing until 10 o'clock in the morning? He got up in the morning, went to mikveh, went to shul, probably sat and learned for a little bit. Then he opened the store at 10 o'clock. Well, I understand. God can't give you a parnasa if you open a store at 10 o'clock, only if you open it at 7 o'clock. The Chafetz Chaim, Chafetz Chaim was the Chafetz Chaim, right? But the Chafetz Chaim had a makolet. That's how he made a living. He had a makolet. Little store. He kept it open half an hour a day. Why? First of all, that was enough to make a living. Second of all, he didn't want to take away the parnasa of everybody else in the city who ran a makolet. If you lived in Rodden, and you had to go buy milk, whose makolet would you go to? I think I'd probably go to the Chafetz Chaim, right? Okay, go to the holiest guys walking around on the earth, right? Okay, so go to the Chafetz Chaim's makolet. So we only open it for half an hour, so it wouldn't affect the business of everybody else. They'd also have customers. That's a pretty holy way to run a makolet. Okay, but that's my rabbim, and it might douse the love or not, right? But there's no question. It's a challenge. Making a living is a challenge. Around here, I hate to be personal, but around here, the reason that we're usually told by people who don't spend enough time learning Torah before they disappear from the yeshiva, what's almost always the reason that they give?
Get a job.
You have to go get a job. I don't know what the rush is. You're going to be alive for another 100 years. You're 20, you're going to be till 120. What's the rush? You're going to be working for 50, 45, 50 years. What'll happen if you spend another year or two sitting and learning Torah before you go into that whole scene? Nothing's going to happen. At the end, you got to understand, you're going to leave more money to your kids because you worked an extra 2 years. I mean, that's not going to happen. Right? Whatever you're supposed to, I'm not killing you off already, don't worry. Right? Whatever it is we're supposed to make, whatever it is you're supposed to make, you're going to make, right? So the Abish don't take care of you. Can the Abish take care of you if you sat in yeshiva for 2 more years and learned Torah instead of entered the workforce at a younger age? Yes. The Abish knows how to do that. He can do that. He's good at it. Look around. Seems to be just fine, right? So it's a build. It's a challenge, okay? But it's the challenge that most people find most difficult. Mm-hmm. And even once I'm out in the workforce, I have to figure out how to do it right. Do it in such a way that it's still the way what the Rebbe says in that mimer, which is the Rebbe saying the whole mimer in the beginning of the mimer in 3 lines. What's the single most important part of your day? Okay, yes, there's davening chakras, and yes, but even more important than all of that is your relationship with your wife and your children. Okay? And relative to your children, their education. Right? What did we just learn in yesterday's EMU? Right? Half an hour a day. It's the same as putting on tefillin. You should be discussing your children's education. Okay? So and you should also be sitting and learning and davening properly, right? Okay, then you have to do that. Okay, so your essential energy, where should it be expressed? In making a living from 9 to 5, or in the learning you do before, the learning you do after, and your relationship with your wife and children that happens after that? Obviously, objectively sitting here without the challenge, it's very easy to give the answer. Well, obviously, I should have more energy for my children than I do for my job. My children are living human beings. My job is just a way to make a few bucks. Right? Now that I'm making those bucks so that my kids will have what they need, I get it. Okay, but don't get so carried away in your this fake righteousness that I'm sacrificing my life for the good of my children and all that. If I don't have a relationship with my children, why am I exactly sacrificing my life for their welfare? They don't even know who I am because I'm always at work. So that's not so useful. Maybe they should know who I am and have a little less, so they'll have 3 outfits during the week instead of 5. They'll only have 2 Shabbos outfits instead of 4. Like, what'll happen? Right? Nothing will happen, but they'll know their father. Right? Oh yeah, I think my father's the second row in the shul. I don't know, he's somewhere here. He's not there very long. Like, he goes, he does pretty quickly, and then he's in the back preparing the good scotch for the kiddush. Guys who make kiddush after the haftarah, during the haftarah, before the haftarah, who knows? Right? Okay. Right. So that's Mayim Rabim, though. That's a challenge. It's a real challenge. Eilam Hazeh is not it's a crazy place. Eilam Hazeh, and the Eibusher knows exactly what where he sent us. Nevertheless, Gama Nadar Slayishtafuah, the last line on the page. What are the Nadar Slayishtafuah? The rivers don't wash it away. So that explains what are the rivers. It's so interesting because this is something that we say all the time, but this image is from Shlomo Melech. The rivers are the stream of consciousness in physical reality. But we talk about a stream of consciousness, right? That's a very common idea. Well, Shlomo Melech talks about the Nadars. What are the Nadars? The rivers. What are the rivers? The stream of consciousness relative to physical reality. It doesn't wash away the love. You might think that since I think about physicality so often, I'm so involved in it, etc., 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 that it could make my nefesh elokis get into Gashmis and forget about the Eibusher. No, that doesn't happen. Does that mean the nefesh elokis is making a lot of noise in my life? He might not be. Does he want to make noise in my life? Yes. Does he ever stop wanting to make noise in my life? No. Does he ever stop wanting to love? Not wanting. Does he ever stop loving God with tremendous passion? No. Sometimes he might not be able to express that down here, and it's very frustrating for the nefesh, very painful for the nefesh. Okay, so that's the Eishmi Lamaila. Okay, so what's that all about? Lefi, next page. The Rishvei Eisha Ava Shel Nefesh Elokis Hu Dugmas Eish Lamaila. The burning love of the Nefesh Elokis is like the fire from above. The Eina Mayim Machabin, I say. The Mayim Rabim, all the craziness of Eilam Hazeh doesn't douse that love. Okay, so now we have 4 minutes. Let's just see quickly. We can talk about a little more on Sunday, but we'll see before Shabbos. We'll see how the basic formula for bringing about a change in our Nefesh Abamis. In this, there has to be the sacrificing of the Nefesh Abamis. That also he will have Aval Elokus, the Nefesh Abamis. Right? The Nefesh Elokis, I don't have to do anything for my Nefesh Elokis to love God. It loves God naturally. The same way you don't have to do anything to breathe. You breathe. Breathing isn't a voida. In a healthy person, breathing isn't a voida. You just breathe. Right? Because that's just who you are. Nefesh Elokis just loves the Eibusher. That's just what it is. Okay. What about the Nefesh Abamis? The Nefesh Abamis doesn't have innate love for God. The Nefesh Abamis, left to itself without any education, is completely uninterested in a relationship with the Kadosh Baruch Hu. It's interested in a relationship with itself and the physical reality around it. And to the extent that relationships with people will serve my purpose, so I'll have relationships with people also. But it'll be self-serving. ובזה צריך להיות הקרוב של נפש הבאמיס, שגם הוא יהיה לו יאהב אל אלוקוס, that he should also love God. And how do I know the nefesh הבאמיס has to love God? We say it every day, constantly. כמו שכתוב, ואהבת את אלוהיך אלוקיך, you should love God, your Lord, b'chol levavcha, with all your heart. Now that word should really be spelled b'chol libcha, with all your heart, because a heart is a lave. Why are there two bases? Rashi and Chumash. Va'amr Razal, it's a medrash, and Rashi quotes the medrash, it's a sifri. Amr Razal, b'shnei yitzrecha, with your two yitzers. So when Chazal say yetzer, when Chassidus will say two nefashot, your nefesh elokis and your nefesh abamis. The nefesh abamis is also supposed to love God. What does that mean, the nefesh abamis loves God? That means conscious you and me can love God and is commanded to love God. That person you refer to as I can love God. Does your nefesh elokis love God? Yes, that's not avodah, that's natural. Does your nefesh abamis love God? Meaning, does conscious you, that experience that you have of yourself, does that person who you call I and me, right? Does that person love God? Yes or no? Okay, depends on the person. Can that person love God? Yes, absolutely. So how does that person love God? So let's just see the Rebbe's going to say it. We'll see it quickly, and then we'll pick it up on Sunday. That also the animal soul, that's our Veda down here, to get our nefesh bahamis, to love God, meaning to get me, to love God. Loving pudding is not necessarily an avodah, right? Or whatever taiva and gashmias it is that's, a person grew up with, right? Whatever it is. Different people grew up with different things. I assume people in China probably don't have a taiva for chocolate pudding. Why? I don't know. They probably don't eat chocolate pudding. They don't eat milchiks, right? No milchiks in Chinese diet. None. Right? Okay. So what do they eat? I don't know. Whatever it is, they have a taiva. Oh, right, taiva for something, right? Okay. Whatever the taiva is, when you grow up in a house in Beijing, so you grow up with a natural affinity for something, whatever it is. Honey flies. Honeyed flies. I don't know. Whatever. Right, as they say that in China they'll eat anything that flies that isn't a plane, and anything with four legs that isn't a table. Right? They have a lot of stuff that they eat that we don't eat. Okay. I mean, I don't just mean Jews. I mean in the West in general, but Jews especially, because it's just so treif. The zeba, how do I get my nefesh elokis to love the Eibishter? Instead of being involved in its desire for some sort of physical pleasure, how do I get my conscious reality to experience pleasure in elokus and to love the Eibishter and want to be connected to the Eibishter and serve him and have my life be part of him? The zeba al yedei hislavshus a nefesh elokis b'nefesh abamis. The clothing of the nefesh elokis in the nefesh abamis. Now, what's a lavush? A lavush is a garment, which is a means of expression. Right? Meaning, I want my nefesh elokis to express itself through my nefesh abamis. How do I do that? Right? The tchil at first, hare nefesh abamis, that the animal soul, ein loy shum yediyah vehergish b'inyanei elokus klal. The nefesh abamis, ein loy, there is not to him shum any yediyah, understanding, vehergish and sensitivity, b'inyanei elokus, in godly matters at all. The nefesh abamis has no sensitivity and no appreciation of godliness. It appreciates whatever it appreciates in Gashmias. Naturally, without any education. Amnam, however, al yedei is lavshus and nefesh elokis, by virtue of the in-clothing of the nefesh elokis. What does that mean? Umisbeinen bisbeinenus eloki, that a person contemplates godly contemplations, meditations, ideas, from the word bina, to understand something, but to understand something very, very deeply, you have to be mitbonein in it. You contemplate it, you meditate on it, right? To hear something once, okay, I understand the idea, but to really understand the idea so that it's an integral part of your conscious reality, so that'll take a certain amount of work to think about it and think about it and think about it until it just becomes part of you. That's called hitbonenut. So now that can happen naturally relative to certain things. At a certain point in your life, you had to learn that roads are dangerous places and cars are dangerous things, and you didn't know that naturally, so you were taught that, right? As time went on, you didn't have to sit down and remind yourself of that actively all the time, but as your life went on and you spent more and more time walking down sidewalks next to roads, the idea of the road being next to you and the danger that that involves became so much part of your consciousness that you don't even have to think about it. It's just there all the time when you're walking on a sidewalk that you know there's a road next to you, you have to be careful. And if you see someone walking right on the curb coming your way, well, you know, you're not going to go into the road to pass him. You're going to go pass him on your left, not on your right. Because if you pass him on your right, you might get hit by a bus. That's a bad idea, right? Because the bus will win. Okay, so, but you don't have to think about that. That just happens. Why? Because okay, and there's other things you really have to contemplate and think about over and over and over until they become very, very settled in your conscious reality. What's that? Elokus, right? But what do you have to think about? Mizbeinin, Elokid, Shagam and Nefesh Abamis Yachol Lasi. We have to learn about HaKadosh Baruch in a way that your Nefesh Abamis can understand. What part of your Nefesh Abamis, obviously, what part of your Nefesh Abamis understands things?
Your intellect.
The intellect of your Nefesh Abamis, human intellect. You learn something about God that human intellect can understand. What's that called in one word? Chassidus. Learn Chassidus. Torah in general, but Chassidus befrat. Learn about the Eibishter in a way that human intellect could understand it. So then what happens? The Eibishter starts to become part of my conscious reality. And I live with Eibishter all day long. And if Eibishter isn't part of my conscious reality, I can't possibly live with him. The same way I assume most people in this room do not live with 18th century French art. Just not part of your life. Why not? Because I don't know anything about 18th century French art, so how long exactly can I have a relationship with myself thinking about 18th century French art? Not very long. I can't name one artist. Okay, but say that, I'm artists. Fine. Are there people who do know something? Yeah, definitely. There are professors who get paid to talk about it. There's 4 people in the class. Right? Okay, but someone's listening.
If they're lucky,
What?
If they're lucky, they'll have 4.
Okay, we'll say that. But there's such a thing, okay? So it might be that I find that really fascinating. I have a book in the washroom about 18th century French artists. It might be fascinating stuff. It could be, so that's what you read about. Fine, you'll know something about it. So you might be able to think about it. Okay, if I can't think about God, then what? I'll have no relationship with him. The only thing I have to say about God, he created the world. Oh, big deal, created the world. He did. Okay, we've done this so many times. What's that like? I'm the guy who picked up the cup. That says a lot about me, doesn't it? Because God creating the world is one thought in his life. One thought in God's life is all of time and all of space. That's the creation of the world, of God. So if that's all I know, so then I don't really know very much, do I? I mean, I know it's pretty important. I know he created the world. I don't get upset, but to appreciate how that happened and what was it about and how did he do that and what's the difference between our Mamalay and what's in our Sevev. Why do we want to know all these things? Well, because if we know all these things, then we can actually have a conversation with other people and a conversation with ourselves about godly reality, because it becomes part of our conscious world. But if I don't know any of these things, so then God can't really be part of me, and I'll probably spend more time thinking about whether, Pele was better than Cruyff. What? I was, when I said Cruyff, I looked right at you.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. Pele was smarter. He didn't smoke himself to death. but do you know what, Shalom? And I'm saying this just for you. I saw them both play.
Huh?
Because I lived in Vancouver, and they both ended up in the North American League to help make soccer move in North America. Pele played in New York, and Cruyff played in Los Angeles. And those teams used to come to Vancouver. No one went to watch the Vancouver team. When they came, you couldn't buy a ticket. It's so interesting. People wanted to see, they heard, he's the best, I want to go see the best. And so I went as a kid. We went to see Pele, and we went to see Cruyff. Pele was more obviously in that. Yeah, they couldn't get the ball away from him. I think he played a different way. Cruyff was like just the brain behind the whole thing, where Pele had the ball all the time, and they couldn't get the ball away from him. All these guys are running after him, and he's just like, fiddling around with it. It was like, I was just a kid. I didn't know what he was supposed to do, but I did notice no one could get the ball from him. So that was interesting to watch. But there you go. See?
Cruyff was also a philosopher.
Cruyff. What do they call it? Total football? had a very close Dutch friend. Very close. He passed away, unfortunately. He was from Maastricht. And he was an Ajax fan to the death.
Oh, yeah.
And he taught me, he used to tell me how it works. I said, come on, Yehuda, this soccer is this, He said, no, you don't understand. You don't understand. And he taught me all about it. Okay, we'll go weiter in this piece on Sunday, but what's the idea? To learn ideas that the Nefesh Bahamis can understand that connect you to Elokus. So now I can think about God. So Rabbi Wichman always likes to say, right? Someone asks you to talk about God, you might talk for 2 or 3 minutes. They ask you to talk about yourself, you'll go on for hours. Okay. I have a lot to say about myself. How much do I have to say about God? How long will I last if I'm talking about God? Well, then he's going to take up that much time in my life. Right? If I have more to say, then I'll take up more time in my life. Right? And those things that we encounter, I mean, I can talk about, I can't say very much about football, but whatever Yehuda taught me, so I have a human intellect, and so I could have a conversation, a little bit of a conversation with a European football fan, because Yehuda taught me a little bit. Okay. Before Yehuda taught me, I couldn't talk about anything. I knew the ball was round. Okay, fine. So Yehuda taught me a little bit. Is that of any use? I don't know. At least you and I can connect on that level, Shalom. Right? There's other levels also. Okay. But total football, that's what I remember he told me all about that. And that Johan Cruyff was the master of that, and it all happened where?
Amsterdam.
No.
Vancouver.
Didn't it happen in Barcelona?
Well, so it started in Amsterdam.
Oh, yeah, okay. See, here, this good Dutchman, and he told me it started in
Yeah.
Barcelona. That's good.
Thank you, Emma.
I have a question for you, I think each in increasing complexity.
Yeah.